point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed, in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
In the last part of this Mind Control series, Part 7, we went through the mind control of the 70s sitcoms. When watching that part, we were able to directly see how the powers that be have been directing our collective minds towards the direction that they have desired. The 70s was a very powerful decade that brought upon major change. We would not be where we are today without the 70s. But after their agenda was complete with the 70s, the 80s would be a decade so impactful that the changes that came through the 70s were simply forgotten. Much of the changes in our morals in the 70s were locked in. And since it was locked in, the next layer of their mental programming was started, which allowed us to collectively enter into deep idolatry that we have never been able to escape from collectively. The decade of the 80s was when the mindset of the world began to shift into pure fiction, and more than ever, our lives were directed by the idiot box that was in over 95% of our homes in America at that time. There was a cultural and moral shift that took place in the 80s that people don't actually recognize. Look at the people of the world today. They are obsessed with money, fame, and wealth. It is everyone's primary focus to be rich and successful. It is even what the churches now primarily speak on. How to get the blessing God has for them. And that blessing most of the time is financial or just having to do with economic success. I was just emailed an advertisement from a church recently in South Florida that said their tickets are going up on their Maximize Their Potential conference. Maximize Their Potential. No lie, a conference in a Christian church all about maximizing one's potential so they can earn more and obtain more in this world. This comes from a church. There is no desire for our Father's kingdom any longer, but only a desire to obtain this world. And if this is the mainstream thought within the churches, you can imagine what is in the minds of the secular world who reject the church. As a society, we are completely obsessed with money and having it. We've been like this for so long, our children growing up today probably think we were always like this. Just like the topic of feminism and the sexual revolution. It probably feels like this is the way we have always been, but that is not true. The way we are today and our love of money was something that was programmed into us. It was the next major form of mind control that they began to program us with as they began to gradually change our moral code. If you went through this mind control series, you can see these agendas and how they manifested. It started with the civil rights agenda, tying everyone into the same system to be a part of their system. Once they tied everyone to their goal of unification, they had us all believe that we would all have a fair and equal chance in changing our economic condition. Then they moved on to women and told them they should not let men hold them back, and this was the rise of feminism. They gave them drugs that interfered with the way the Most High created their bodies and making them focus more on their careers than starting families. Then the sexual revolution started and the institution of marriage was destroyed. And through the midst of all of that, there were other things subtly attacking us through our music and culture. There were many things that happened in the 70s that led us into the 80s. By the time Reagan came on the scene, people were desperate and hopeful for change. And it was this time that they moved on to their next agenda, which we saw form in the 80s. In the 80s, we see the mind control begin to take root that controls us to this day. A mental mindset that will lead a majority of people in this world to hell. That mindset is that greed is good, that making money is our sole purpose in life. It is a view that has transitioned the minds of the world to focus their thoughts around earning money created by Satan. It is a mindset of idolatry that took root and became a real stronghold in the 80s. And the thing is that most people don't even recognize that it's there. In order to understand the 80s, we need to deal with the most dangerous thought that was the guiding theme back then and still is throughout the world to this day. That thought is that
greed is good.
Let's begin. So in the last part of the series, part 7, I dealt with the statistics of unemployment in the 70s. We saw a drastic difference between unemployment in the white community versus the Negro community. If we're going to understand how the public was led, you cannot ignore the economic factors that brought everyone into the 80s. We ended that chart about the 70s in the year 1979 with unemployment for all at 5.8%. But again, that doesn't give us an accurate picture. In 1979, white unemployment was at 5.1%, but for Negroes, it was at 12.3%. But as we first move into the 80s, things did not get better at first. Remember from part 6 when we discussed the energy crisis with Carter in 79? By 1980, the unemployment rate went to 7.1% nationally. By 81, it was 7.6%, 82, 9.7%, and 83, 9.6%. In white America in 1980, the unemployment rate was 6.3%, 81, 6.7%, 82, 8.6%, and 83, 8.4%. In the Negro community, 1980, it was 14.3%. In 81, 15.6%. 82, 18.9%. And by 83, it reached a height of 19.5%. Almost 20% of Negroes in America were unemployed, and of the ones that were employed, they were not in high-paying jobs. There was a serious problem. If you can't see that 20% unemployment in one specific community could plague a whole community, then you're not looking fairly. But let's keep going. It should be noted that this is how those that control this world work, how they operate. Because things are so bad, the problem was notably centered around money or lack thereof. So, what was the solution? It was simple, really, and it seems like a give me. But if you don't really analyze it, you can miss what happened. The people were without one thing, and it was told to them that this one thing would fix all their problems. And so the main thing that happened within the people was that they started living their lives to obtain more money. And this was the beginning of that major mindset that was in the 80s under Reagan. Let's discuss more about why. Remember that it wasn't just the fact that jobs were hard to come by, but the fact that even if you got a job, the cost of living was so much more higher than what wages were. Inflation was the problem. By 1980, it had hit a peak of 14%, but in the years after, it had started to come down. Now, in the thoughts of the general public, they credited this mainly to Reagan and his economic policies of change. But to those who understood money, I'm sure they understood it was all due to the Federal Reserve tightening, bringing interest rates to a high of 20% in 1980. But in 2024, people don't understand what the Fed does, so I'm sure in 1980, nobody really recognized truly who the hero in the fight of inflation was, besides the news mentioning Volcker at times. Anyways, there was a problem with the money. And in order to make ends meet, it wasn't just about making money, but more about how much money you made. Making a good amount of money was necessary for survival. And so through the time that the public gave Ronald Reagan, who declared when he first took office that the United States was in the worst economic mess since the Great Depression, after he passed through his major economic changes known as Reaganomics, the economy began to see new life. What he did in a nutshell was give the rich tax cuts and breaks that shifted economic burdens to the United States and the taxpayer rather than the United States corporations. The United States economy went through a transition that people were not told was happening. It started on Wall Street with banking and finance. You see, banking and finance were not always a road to fabulous riches in this country. Throughout much of the 20th century, up until the 1980s, there was almost no pay differential between financial and non-financial professionals. In the 1980s, there was an economic boom because the economy shifted from manufacturing to consumption. And so after deregulation and the tax cuts were made for the wealthy, there was then a 15-year stock market boom that was unprecedented. The 1980s began the financialization of the United States economy. It was at this time that Wall Street began to be the engine for growth for the United States economy, as opposed to manufacturing. In the 1980s, the financial industry began to chase short-term financial returns over long-term goals, which will require investment in technology and product development. When I speak of financial instruments, they include some things like stocks, ETFs, bonds, CDs, mutual funds, loans, etc. But there's more. They all provided quick returns with little fuss. So investors invested in software that facilitated this approach rather than investing in costly brick and mortar needed to build factories. You see, this is also at the time of the rise of the computer, the personal computer. The people focused on making money first. They were also supportive of products that could be sold at stores like Walmart and manufactured overseas. As a result, the financial industry played a major role in the decline of manufacturing in the United States. In the early 80s, Wall Street became very active in buying, selling, and dismantling companies.
I am not a destroyer of companies. I am a liberator of them.
Corporate raiders contributed to inequality as they dismembered firms, laid off workers, auctioned off assets, and destroyed entire communities to reach huge rewards for a few stakeholders. When Reaganomics started, the gap between rich and the poor took off like never before, and there was now a desire to be a part of the come-up. Everyone was desiring to be rich. In August 12th of 1982, the Dow Jones had finally bottomed. Though the economy was still in recession, and while many investors were sure that stocks would never again have appeal again, the bull market began. You see, at this time, inflation was on the decline. The Federal Reserve was slashing interest rates, and many companies were in the midst of cost-cutting that would set the scene for the profit boom of the mid to late 80s. But in the mainstream, much of this was said to be because of Reaganomics. They praised Reagan, saying that it was because of him letting go of the reins. By the end of 1982, the Dow was at 1,046. But by the end of 1986, it reached 1,895. And by the end of 1989, it was at 2,753, despite the 1987 market crash. Also, something else that went along with the economic boom during the 80s was with Ronald Reagan winning the Cold War, making that the idea and support of communism died. The philosophy of communism and socialism became completely unaccepted. This not only led to the breaking up of the Soviet Empire and the withering away of the threat of world nuclear war, but also to an explosion of capitalism in nation after nation. The idea of capitalism began to take over the world. On March 28, 1985, President Ronald Reagan made his first of two visits to the New York Stock Exchange to salute the robust American expansion, as well as the central role of the New York Stock Exchange as the nerve center of entrepreneurial capitalism. He was the first sitting U.S. president to visit the New York Stock Exchange, and while he was there, he proclaimed, "We're bullish on the American economy."
And for all those who say we can't repeat the dramatic growth or record of the past 2 years, I can only paraphrase my chief of staff. We're bullish on the American economy. And
You're gonna have to speed it up.
control our economy will be free to expand to its full potential, driving the bears back into permanent hibernation. That's our economic program for the next 4 years. We're going to turn the bull loose.
Now, I can go into many different ways and reasons why the United States economy started picking up, but in the end, it really doesn't matter right now, more than knowing that it did in a big way. The thing that's most important to understand is what this economic boom created. So as the stock market began to take off and the public saw this happening, it began to be reported in the news and spoken about everywhere. And all of a sudden, people that never before had anything to do with the stock market were now brought into it. There was a new desire to take part in this new wealth. One generation more than any other. Yeah, you know it, the baby boomers. They were the new face of wealth in America, while those with the true power and true wealth went quietly behind the scenes, and they allowed a new generation to emerge that they allowed to be the face of wealth. The true power was going behind the scenes, never to come out in the front again, and they put up frontmen that we all follow right now to this day. But I'm not going to go too fast with this. Let's go back. It started with the yuppies. Yuppies, short for young urban professional, or young upwardly mobile professional. It was a term coined in the early 1980s for a young professional person working in a city. The yuppies were the baby boomers from the 1970s that let go of that hippie life and began to grow up and attach to the emergence of the American economy. This same generation that was against materialism and the repression of the government, in the 80s, they became the face of change again with our morals. They were now the new face of wealth in America.
It has been quite a time for the yuppie, the young, upwardly mobile professional. What with someone putting out a yuppie handbook and with Newsweek making the yuppie a cover story. Well, we are thrilled to report yet another milestone, the official social debut of the yuppie. It is a coming out party that's been some time in the making, and Barry Peterson has our report.
A letter from the 60s. Dear Mom and Dad, we reject the system. We don't trust anyone over 30, so watch out. The times, they are a-changin'. Welcome to that new age. They call themselves yuppies.
Basically, it's somebody who just likes to party amidst balloons and other yuppies.
Are you a yuppie?
I guess so, I'm here.
We're going for the 80s.
We're going for the six figure. That's all we want.
They call this the first yuppie cotillion. Forget dress for success, said the invitation. Dress for excess, black tie only. If Mom and Dad thought this generation was going to the dogs, think again. This is the generation that has discovered hard work and success. Are you listening, Mom and Dad? And the BMW. At the yuppie cotillion, BMW meant beauty, money, wealth. Some didn't get the joke and protested. There was even a generation gap.
And you guys are out here with signs downing money. Obviously, I marched in 60s peace marches with my parents.
We're the generation that you betrayed! That's who we are! That's who we are! You betrayed us!
Get out of our society and go to Moscow. Go everywhere you think is better.
Consider Peter.
We are talking about men and women in their late 20s, early 30s, now making $1 million a year from selling financial instruments. They wanted everything from the world, and they wanted it immediately. Making money became their number one goal. So as I mentioned earlier about the true power going behind the scenes, this is the time where we see Donald Trump come on the scene and begin his rise to success and make his brand. This is where we begin to see the rise of the celebrity. This is where we really begin to see movie stars as being important people, where we see shows like The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous on television. They used to show us all these things to make us admire and love the rich. There was a movement that became obsessed with wealth. And I'm sure if you lived during this time and you just go back and think about it, you can see it all plainly again. So the American economy began to rebound again. Now, if we go back to the 40s and the 50s after World War II, when people started working again, in order for the American economy to take off and its new frontier, is when we saw the rise of the middle class. We saw the government intervene with the GI Bill and help the World War II veterans buy homes in the suburbs. In this new round of American revival, it was not the government that pushed this growth, but it was the banking and finance sector that pushed it. As all of this economic revival began to take hold, there was a major push towards consumerism. In the 1980s, the whole idea of shopping began to change. This was the world that I grew up in, and it was just recently built and I didn't even know it. In the 1980s, 16,000 shopping malls sprout up in the United States, and they became the epicenter of shopping in America. And shopping became a part of the culture in America. It all became about money and what money could buy you. The advertisements were fully focused on driving us to spend and buy something. And then suddenly, credit cards became a part of everyone's lives, and all of a sudden, the culture in America turned into spending money that they didn't even have. Spending money was all of a sudden the new way of America, and nobody realized that the United States transitioned itself from a manufacturing economy to now a consumer-driven economy. So, in order for it to be wealthy and do well economically, the people had to buy more and spend more. And that is the way it is to this day. So what happens is, as you now watch the history of the stock market, you see the value and increase in wealth in the S&P 500 is now directly correlated to the level of consumerism in America that will later spread to the rest of the world. If people aren't buying products and we're not spending money in the stores, the world economy isn't doing well. Because while in Asia, they're the ones making these products, they're depending on us over here in the West buying their products. And if we're not doing well, the rest of the world will not do well. This is the way it works. We didn't realize that they were programming us to be idolaters in order for them to keep their major lie afloat. People were spending money everywhere, in the malls and even on television itself. This is where we saw home shopping networks start popping up and people buying products from the television. Even religion took hold of this newfound prosperity, and this is where we see the prosperity gospel in America take hold. This is where we start seeing televangelists coming on air telling watchers to send them money. What I'm trying to explain is that the culture in America began to be obsessed with money. Even in the Negro community, who rebounded much later than the other communities, they too were marketed into obtaining money at all costs, which is where we see the rise of the drug dealers as heroes in our communities because they were the ones making money. Drugs began to come on the scene in the 1980s. You see, as Reagan's war on drugs increased, so did the availability of it in our communities. And so as consequence of all this, in New York and in LA and other major cities across the country, Negroes started having their own hood leaders that were able to take advantage of the economic boom that everyone else was. And we loved that because they were the only ones we saw prospering. You see, the Negro community, they were not a part of that economic boom that everyone else was a part of, with the stock market and with credit. And like I said, drugs have recently entered the community. And so to the eyes of us, the children, the ones that looked successful and that were doing something were actually the enemies. They were the ones that were pushing drugs, destroying our communities. But we never saw the correlation, and we still don't see it to this day. We only saw that they were given access to money. They had money, and we all wanted to be like them. And later on, the people that control this world, they were able to see how easily we were controlled by this, and then they began to find our heroes, the most immoral people, give them money, and made them our heroes. But I'm going too far too fast. Let me slow down. Money became the most important thing in the lives of all Americans. And towards the end of the 80s, a man named Ivan Boesky, who was a corporate raider nicknamed Ivan the Terrible, he worked for several stock brokerage companies, including L.F. Rothschild and Edwards and Hanley, which was again a Rothschild firm. He gave a commencement speech at UC Berkeley School of Business in 1986, where he said, "Greed is all right, by the way. I want you to know that. I think greed is healthy. You can be greedy and still feel good about yourself." And shortly after this, the movie Wall Street comes out with Michael Douglas in 1987, and Michael Douglas famously takes Boesky's phrase and makes it into an iconic line that defines the 80s, saying, "Greed is good." And from that influence right there, it has been the recurring mindset that has been the stronghold on our morals and values since most of us were born. Get this right now. We were marketed idolatry in order to save the economic future of America, and we ate it up. Ronald Reagan said what he wanted to see from America above all is that this country remains a country where someone can always get rich.
But what I want to see above all is that this country remains a country where someone can always get rich. That's the thing that we have and that must be preserved.
And this has been the thriving thought of our culture. This is the main thought everyone has today. How can they get rich? How can they obtain wealth? And over this time, this love of money has been a root to all kinds of evil in this country and this world. It's not that money's bad. You can have money and you can even have nice things and still not get caught up in all that evil. It's not having the money that is the problem. It's the love of money that is our problem. The scriptures explain it. Now, godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. You'll find that in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 10. You see, when you look at our lives today, you can see that the desire for wealth is what is the most prevalent thought within everyone. Just go through your social media feeds and see what people speak of. They speak of getting wealth and their economic knowledge and how they do this and how they do that. It's all about their wealth and how well they can achieve it. This is the current mindset and goal of everyone in this world today. It is all about how to obtain money and riches, fame and success, just so you can live like the rich does. You see, before the 80s, the separation of the very wealthy in this world and the middle class and poor was not the main purpose of society. If you remember, back in the 70s, these same baby boomers were hippies and were against the excesses of capitalism and materialism. They were all about peace and love and sharing. They were communal, sharing everything. Their parents were different, but it wasn't all about wealth with them. It was about raising their families. Family was the most important thing before their transition took place. I mean, it's one thing to want to have enough so that you can support your family and grow your family up secure without a lot of pressures and without crime and all those other things. But that's not even the mindset today. Most people aren't even having families because they desire to be wealthy. They desire to be famous. They desire to have a high-paying job, a great career. All these things are more important than starting families. It's because money became our main purpose in life. The 80s was a time of moral transition where obtaining money was the most important thing. This was definitely pressed into the baby boomer generation the most. And so it was them in the 80s that were coming out of the worst decade of the 70s, and they desired to make the changes in their life that would allow them to become rich and successful. And if you speak to baby boomers, this is all they can think about. They only can think about getting money.
What do you get out of this? What's the big kick?
I guess, making a lot of money.
And it was at this time in the 80s where the mind control really started to be presented to them that would promote this thought about money even more to them. Towards the end of the 70s, they already started the mind control that would help lead this thought. Now, people like to try to use the argument, playing devil's advocate, that television just matched the mood of the people. But when you look at this, you can clearly see this was not the case. You see, in the last part of the series, I stopped at certain shows and didn't really discuss the shows that popped up towards the end of the 80s, because those programs that were created towards the end of the 70s were not about the programming of that period of hardship. It was about mentally preparing and pushing the mindset that would be needed in the 80s. I'm going to show you that the desire for wealth and money was not by accident. It was carefully placed there through the television. We'll start with this first show, Dallas. Dallas was an American primetime television soap opera that aired on CBS from April 2nd, 1978 to May 3rd, 1991. The series revolved around an affluent and feuding Texas family, the Ewings, who owned the independent oil company Ewing Oil and a cattle ranch land on South Fork. The show is known for its portrayal of wealth, sex, intrigue, conflict, and power struggles. Throughout the series, the main premise is the longtime rivalry between the Ewing and Barnes family. Oil tycoon J.R. Ewing became the show's breakout character, whose schemes and dirty business became the show's trademark. When the show ended on May 3rd, 1991, J.R. was the only character to have appeared in every episode. And the 1980 episode, Who Done It, remains the second highest rated primetime telecast ever. This show was all about wealth and power. It began to display to the masses a view that was beginning to form, that money and wealth brought you happiness. It brought intrigue and fantasy about being rich. The next show was Dynasty. This was an American primetime television soap opera that aired on ABC from January 12, 1981 to May 11, 1989. It revolved around the Carringtons, a wealthy family residing in Denver, Colorado. It was another show that was put out about the wealthy. It even began to bring out more controversial issues in the mainstream that began to push the moral fabric of the population. Dynasty explored issues such as rape, homosexuality, and racial integration, and put middle-aged women in the forefront. But in the background, it was all about being wealthy and rich. In 1985, Esther Shapiro, creator of the television show, said, "We've done important things for women with Dynasty, for middle-aged women. You know, to let them know that it's okay to want power and be romantic." You see, they knew that they were putting thoughts in the minds of the public, and the public were eating them all up. They knew what they were doing. And be clear, it wasn't just soap opera dramas either. One show that you can absolutely see the mind control was with Different Strokes. You see, you couldn't just make a whole bunch of series like The Jeffersons speaking about wealth in the black community, because that wasn't the reality. So they made a whole storyline here with different strokes that brought the Negroes into the white community so we can see how wealth and power was while getting us to watch it. Different Strokes was an American television sitcom which aired on NBC from November 3rd, 1978 to May 4th, 1985. The sitcom starred Gary Coleman as Arnold and Todd Bridges as his older brother Willis, two children from a poor section of Harlem whose deceased mother previously worked for rich widower Philip Drummond, and on her deathbed asked him to take care of her sons, their father already being deceased. They live in a penthouse with Drummond, his daughter Kimberly, and their housemaid. The series made a star of Gary Coleman, and it became known for the very special episodes in which serious issues such as racism, illegal drug use, alcoholism, hitchhiking, kidnapping, and child sexual abuse were dramatically explored. They brought a lot of things to the attention of its viewers, and all that needs to be discussed later. But at the backdrop, it was a show that brought the Negroes into looking at the life of the rich. Poor Negro boys now living in a penthouse in Manhattan was not the normal story of life. It's purely fiction, but just another attempt to bring in thoughts of being rich. I remember those subtle thoughts. I remember watching that show. This is actually one of the first shows I can remember watching on television. Then there was Benson, an American television sitcom that originally aired on ABC from September 13th, 1979 to April 19th, 1986. Benson Dubois is hired to be the head of household affairs for widowed Governor Eugene X. Noble. The show focused on the conflicts and relationships with the governor's household, with Benson generally being the sarcastic voice of reason. It was a different type of wealth, but it all showed lifestyles that were not the main view of the normal viewing public. And let's not forget, like I said, the Jeffersons. I spoke about them in part 7. This was one of the longest running sitcoms, having 11 seasons, starting in the 70s and ending in the 80s after the economic transition fully went into gear. This was a show about Negro wealth coming into a place where white America was. They were moving on up. This was a hit Negro series because of the hope it gave us. It sold the dream of financial success for the Negro, and it was very influential in the Negro community. It is not something that we can ignore. This is what they put in our face and slowly made our lives revolve around these purposes. You must notice that all these shows all were before the rise of American business in the 80s that started in August of 1982. All these shows were before then, and yes, there were others, and many others definitely came after. But before the economic boom in the 80s, they were displaying lives of people not in American daily life, not the lives that normal people had, but they subtly created the fantasy of lives that we all aspired to have. They created the programming that would propel the American mindset of greed. And then when things started to take off, then more shows would come in and help direct these thoughts. Shows like Family Ties with Michael J. Fox as Alex Keaton, an iconic character. What I'm trying to say is that the 80s began the mental mindset of seeking out wealth, and slowly but surely, it became the goal of every person in America to become rich. Of course, everyone did not attain this, but this became our goal, and it was understandable why this became everyone's goal. Nobody would judge you for trying to be rich. Everyone desired this, boy and girl, man and woman, and this thought was even less about the baby boomers, but more about their children who they were now raising, because maybe it could not happen to the baby boomers, but they were now raising their children who would have the chance, and those who were not able to go to college when they were younger, they were going to send their children to college and give them the chance to be successful and wealthy. All of us who were born to these baby boomers, we were all programmed into a new world that they did not recognize that they were a part of. And we were just pawns and puppets of a whole system of control. I may need to cover this in more detail because, like I said, even the churches, their goals started being about economic prosperity. And that's not just with those who taught the prosperity gospel, but even with the Baptist churches who had pastors that showed wealth and power. And because of their wealth, they became their leaders of their congregants. The desire for wealth became the main goal of society in the 80s. And towards the end of this decade, with a movie like Wall Street, it only solidified the idea that greed was good. And this thought expanded and continued to grow until now we are at a point in time where we are defined by our wealth. Money is the determination of success, not a strong family, not raising children to be ones with high morals and values. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to the everyday people. What matters is if you raise your children well enough to know how to make money in America. A parent will be praised if they had children that were successful and had good jobs with no children and no family. And those that raise their family to have children and raise a family, even though the economic situation isn't the same as the others, they're looked at as raising their children as being naive and not ready for the world. It's crazy. It's a whole shift. There's actually too much to say on this, but the contrasting thought that people have excluded is thinking about the will of the Most High. And I'm not saying that the thought about the will of the Most High was on the minds of the people before the 80s, but the problem of the 70s could have steered people into a more trusting, dependent role on Yah if this Christian country actually desired it to be. If our Christian president promoted it, if the corporations in our television programs promoted actually submitting to Yah and to reading his word, this is how the people would be. Like with Ronald Reagan, they spoke about having Christian values, but they also spoke about having a desire in our hearts to get rich or die trying. The United States dollar became the god of the Americans and the rest of the world, and everyone else in the world who followed them and wanted to get a taste of the life that Americans had. This is why so many people will come here from other countries. The most important thing in everyone's lives became that dollar. The dollar became their god. And who was the god on the back of that dollar bill? Yes, Lucifer. Our lives were being directed to chase the dollar. This was the purpose of everyone's lives, to chase the dollar. We were made to believe that we could do nothing without obtaining these dollars, and that the happiest people on earth were the ones that had more dollars. And our life was made to be in pursuit of them. This was not always the thought in America. This thought was brought into the mainstream in the 1980s, and we have never been the same since. You have to think about it. If this was always the thought, there would have been no reason for a man like Boski or for what is said in Wall Street. He wouldn't have to say that because it would have already been a thought people have had for generations. They were transitioning and now telling people that greed was good. That was the change. This thought of greed was brought into the mainstream in the 1980s, and again, we have never been the same since. As a majority, for the collective, this is the only goal of our lives, to wake up and chase these dollars. And in order to chase them, we must forsake our values and our morals, depending on how much of these dollars that we want to make. And later on, that mind control will be projected in even higher doses. I'm just right now in the mid-80s when the changes really started to take hold. The fact is that most of us have grown up in a society that has told us to be idolaters, and that our main source in the world was not the Most High, but it was the United States dollar. It was a thought that was carefully programmed into us, and it is a thought that will lead a majority of us straight to hell. The first commandment given to Yasharel, Israel, was, "You shall have no other gods before me." That's Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. But we have been taught to break this commandment when it comes to money because the main opinion is, of course, we need money. But what happens is that when we make that mental change and make money our source, it actually happens that money is not actually our source, but we become our source because we are the ones who determine how much we have and whether we will have enough or not. And so we have made our lives our main focus. If we focus on ourselves enough and building up our earning potential, then we can make more money. And then if we made enough of the money, we would give it back. That's the way people work today. But what we don't see is that this is not how Yahuah operates. If we focused on him, then he would lead us and he would sustain us. He would provide for us. I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. That's Psalm chapter 37, verse 25. But we were not brought up to trust in Yahuah as our source. We were told it was all about us and the hero that is inside us. We were not just led to be idolaters and seek after wealth, but we were taught to reject Yahuah and limit our trust of him. In the scriptures, we were told, "Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of Elohim is coming upon the sons of disobedience." Colossians chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. We were told, "Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I told you beforehand, just as I told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of Elohim." Galatians chapter 5, verses 19 through 21. All of these things, if you actually review them, are the doctrines of life in America. We have been taught that if we engage in those things, it will bring us more wealth. This is what our television shows show us. If you watch shows like Dallas and Dynasty, that's their whole life, everything that was in that list. These are all things that the wealthy do. These are all things shown in television shows that were presented to us. Get this straight. We have been trained and we have been brought up in a culture that intends to keep us from inheriting the kingdom of Yahuah. And you must recognize this and walk completely away. We are just getting into this mind control and how deep it actually went. For me personally, I know that as I got older, these preliminary programs I'm speaking about didn't reach me as hard as what happened in the 90s. But I know that shows like Different Strokes, Webster, Family Ties, and others definitely laid a ground floor for my foundation that the next leg of programming escalated. It is important that we all wake up to the fact that we have been purposely led to be idolaters. It is important that we analyze our relationship with money and our goals in our life. My goal is for Yahuah's kingdom and obtaining it. You see, money is not real. The wicked at the top control it, and it is theirs. It's not Yahuah's. He has nothing to do with it, but he is our source, and when we come to him and trust in him, he can direct us how we will be able to live in this world through this system built by the wicked. It's important that we repent and put down our idols and reject the mind control that has been placed upon us. Greed is not good. Money is not our purpose or goal in life, and the love of money is the root of all evil. We have been purposely conditioned to love money, and it is at this time where we all must review our thoughts and what we have been programmed to believe, and if it is not a thought that aligns with Yahuah, we must discard it and replace it with Yah's righteousness. Greed is not good. Whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. That's Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Listen, before all this burns and goes away, you must turn to Yah and tell him that none of these things are your source or your purpose. And you actually desire him and only him. Ask him what you must do and how you must do it, and focus on the answer that he gives you. Listen, focus on Yah and make sure you make yourself ready for him today. Be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay. Listen, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please make sure to like it and share this video with others. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Please make sure to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. Again, I want to thank everyone who is sowing into this ministry. I feel very humbled by this assignment Yahuah has given me, and your support truly blesses this ministry. Thank you for your assistance in helping me carry this out and serving him. I'm truly grateful for you. You know who you are. Thank you again for your support and allowing Yahuah to work through you. May Yah bless you. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.